If I bleed tonight, if I am sad tonight, I don't have a job to find. And if I work tonight, if I'm so tired tonight, I'll fall asleep when I'm home.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you're prepared to exercise your minds with this week's episode of Strata-Gym-Ep. I'm your host, Andrew Freeman, and I've got some strategy experts with me breaking down your favorite 40k and Age of Sigmar armies so you can go out and destroy and conquer friends or foes. On a legal note, none of the things said in this show represent Games Workshop or any of its affiliated companies. This show is in no way affiliated or owned by Games Workshop. This show is created by two guys in a small broom closet that enjoy nerding out to OP formations that put so much cheese on the board, it makes grown men cry. Today I have with me Brad. Tell the listeners, Brad, how you got into the hobby and why you picked Astra Militarum, Eldar, Necrons, Orcs, and Deathwatch as your armies.
Well, I got into Games Workshop and Warhammer 40k, a friend of mine back at about the year 2000. Looked at it, always had been eyeing it at our local hobby store, and we kind of flipped a coin between, we both wanted to be a shooty army, and we kind of liked the way the Tau and the Astra Militarum looked, and we flipped, and I guess I don't remember whether I won or lost the flip, but I got Astra Militarum. So, kind of been in ever since then.
Very cool, very cool. What future hobby are you working on? Are you painting? Are you building?
Well, right now I'm trying to finish up some Ogryns and Bulgryns that I've been working on. My biggest thing of the hobby is I'm not a big, huge fan of painting the models. I love the way they look, and I love doing it, but I don't like doing it a ton. My favorite thing doing the hobby is playing the games, and when it comes to painting, I love making terrain and having the scenes that the guys kind of get set up on. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the hobby.
All right, let's get into core reps. Let's get into it. The Emperor protects. Now, Brad, how do you start building an Astra Militarum army?
Well, I look at Astra Militarum as you got to figure out what kind of army you want to play. And there's two real strengths with Astra Militarum in my mind. You've got the hordes of infantry and the sheer number of bodies that they present, or you've got the heavy hammer that is the heavy support of Astra Militarum. They're renowned for their tanks. So you try to figure out, do you want to play as an infantry horde, or do you want to play as a heavy support? You can kind of mix and match and play the old World War II style of combined arms and mix and match the two. But I kind of figure, pick which style you want and go for that.
What style do you lean harder on?
I kind of play right now with the introduction of 8th, I'm kind of leaning towards the tanks. But I tend not to play the Leman Russ because I'm not a big fan of it. So I play this kind of combined arms style.
Not to interject, but why? What about the Leman Russ sort of makes you shy away from it?
Sure. Well, the Leman Russ, it's, with the standard battle tank variation, it's running at 162 points. It's got your Strength 8 battle cannon that's got a 60-inch range, maybe 72-inch range. Decent range. It's going to hit anywhere, but it requires line of sight. For that points, moving and shooting, taking the -1 for the heavy bolter sponsons or whatever sponsons you put on it, it's a negative, taking that -1. It really hurts. Mm-hmm. In exchange, I end up finding that when I play with them, I tend to use them more like artillery, just sitting back and using that heavy gun and really maximizing that range in order to not take any negatives to hit. And don't get me wrong, the Leman Russ, when it moves, it gets to shoot its primary battle cannon without taking the -1.
Very cool.
So it still gets some nice things, but I still find that I don't want to be mobile with my tanks. That's what other things are for. So if I'm not going to be mobile and I just want to use it as a gun platform, why am I using a tank when I could instead be using a Manticore or a Basilisk, which come in at a much lower price range with an even better, stronger gun? The Basilisk comes in at 108 points, and it ignores line of sight. In exchange for that, I also get a +1 strength weapon, so instead of strength 8, it's a strength 9, and it's going to hit 120-inch range, so it hits anywhere on the board in virtually any angle. In exchange, I get 1 less wound and 2 less toughness. That hurts, but I'm saving 50-plus points.
Which can get you a lot more on the table.
Well, which then I turn around and combine with a Master of Ordnance from the Elite for a cheap... for, I believe, about 38 points. So 38 points, and I now get the ability to re-roll 1s when I'm 36 inches away. Now, the Master of Ordnance buffs not only the Basilisk, but also the Manticore. The Manticore is 133 points with 2d6 shots.
Awesome.
At strength 10. Also ignoring line of sight and a 240-inch range, I believe.
How does it buff it?
What it does is if you are within 6 inches of a Basilisk, a Manticore, or certain other of the heavy support artillery type pieces, such as I think the Hydra, you get to reroll 1s when targeting a unit that is 36 inches or more away. So being able to reroll 1s gives you that ability to be much more effective at hitting. It does allow you to move a little bit if you need, because now, yeah, you may be hitting on a 5+, but you're getting to reroll 1 still as long as you stick with that tank. So I tend to be a big fan of the Master of Ordnance combined with the Basilisk. Adding in that you also get a one-shot Lemon Rust cannon, essentially, that has, again, a huge range, hitting on a 3+ if you can see it. It's 1 time per game, but, for 38 points, that's a great bargain.
What leader or warlord would you throw in there?
Well, in addition to armor, I really am a big fan of the Hellhound, which comes in under fast attack, but it really fits the armor concept. It's on a Chimera chassis, but it's got the Inferno Cannon, which is a 16-inch range, strength 6 flamer, with a -1 AP, doing 2 damage.
That's
auto hit.
Double distance on your flamer.
Exactly, and it's only coming in at 101 points.
And this edition is the edition of Flame.
Absolutely. It's definitely, in my opinion, the best version of the Hellhound. I'm a big fan of just throwing heavy bolters on all those tanks, because heavy bolters, 8 points, it's cheap, it's effective. Yeah, I may be taking a -1 to hit, but that's great.
That's a lot more rounds downrange, though.
Absolutely. And your other variants of the Hellhounds, I think the super short range of the Chem Cannon, which is being only an 8-inch range, I think that hurts. And they really weakened the Devil Dog, which had the Melta cannon. It really hurt. Melta's not nearly as effective in this edition.
With an 8-inch range, it's almost like they're saying you're either going to get one shot or you're going to get Overwatch.
Absolutely.
Because everything you're setting up on the board usually has a 9-inch buffer rule.
Absolutely.
Bubble.
Which is part of the reason why I love the Hellhound. With a 16-inch range, yeah, you may be charging me from 10 inches away, but I'm still going to get my Hellhound Overwatch.
Now, what changes in 8th edition really have helped or hurt Astra Militarum?
Astra Militarum, I think, if the Basilisk got cheaper, the Manticore got cheaper, so both of those artillery pieces I'm a fan of, both got cheaper. Additionally, the Heavy Bolter weapons team, gosh, it is dirt cheap now. At 4 points for a heavy weapons team with an 8-point Heavy Bolter, I'm throwing a Heavy Bolter downrange for 12 points. A heavy weapons team, I'm throwing 3 heavy bolters on the field for 36 points. That's the cheapest heavy support unit I think you'll find in any codex. So the heavy support, the artillery got cheaper. The Rough Riders have kind of made a comeback. They're 10 points apiece. Their lance now is reusable, whereas before it was a one-shot only. So now you've got a unit that can recharge after every round, or basically every time that they're back into a time where they can charge. Additionally, their horse now gets an attack, so they get an extra attack now, and they're now 2 wounds. Before, they were about 10 points apiece on average as well in 7th edition, but they just didn't have the survivability. They had 1 wound, they could easily die. Now, their 2 wounds, they're still going to die pretty easily. They only have a 5-up armor save. But 10 points apiece, you can usually afford to lose them.
That's pretty cheap. 10 points apiece.
For a unit that gets a decent mobility, and their real role in Astra Militarum needs to be to react to others assaulting you.
And that might be one of the cheapest 2-wound units or models I've ever heard of.
I think it'd be pretty close. I think the bird flock from the Darka Eldar were cheaper, but they just, I think, got increased with the most recent FAQ.
Yeah, that's true. What kind of weaknesses do you have to be aware of as a new Astra Militarum and 8th edition player?
Astra Militarum has a huge weakness when it comes to melee. They are not a melee army. They are a shooting army. So you have to be prepared for the heavy melee that is kind of in the current meta. So in order to do that, you utilize Rough Riders, you utilize Flamers. If you're running standard infantry squads, throw a Flamer in every squad.
Yep.
It's a great way to just thin the rank and get a little bit of defense against them. Add into that, I've become a fan of the Bulgrins. I wasn't a fan of them in previous editions, but in this current edition, they have gotten a real bump, in my opinion. Their cost went down a little, not a lot, but just a few points, but their toughness and the different things that the way armor works in this edition, I think that really has helped to them. I like throwing them with a slab shield and a maul and using them as that role of that anti-infantry, that anti-melee assault. They come in, they charge, throw a 6-man squad in there. They're coming in charging with 4 attacks on the charge, 7 strength. I throw them with a slab shield that gives them a 2+ armor save, which, with the way the AP works in this edition, that it subtracts from the armor save, even a Melta is going to give them -4. That's going to be a 6-up armor save. They're still going to get something. And I think they have 3 wounds now.
3 wounds, wow. In this edition, in 8th edition, it's been the edition of Hordes. What would you do differently if you're facing another Horde army? Because it's well known Astra Militarum is indeed a shooty Horde army. What would you put on the table if you're facing Tyranids or Orcs?
Well, the Astra Militarum version of the Horde is utilizing the conscripts, which is great. The conscripts have fantastic. They're dirt cheap, 3 points each. They are the cheapest infantry unit there is in the game. You can throw a 50-man squad, but they get no special weapons, so the same issue you have with needing flamers, you don't have that as an option. Add in their terrible leadership. You have to combine them with a commissar, and if you want the orders effect, which is the special feature of the Astra Militarum, you got to have an officer that's going to run around with them. So you can deal with hordes by either trying to beat them at their own game with just the conscripts, or you thin them down with sheer numbers of fire. Those heavy bolter teams that are dirt cheap, there isn't many horde armies that are going to stand up to 100. Say I throw 200 points of heavy support on the board. I could easily fit in 6 or 7 Astra Militarum heavy weapons team. That's a lot of heavy bolters that are going to mow through any horde army out there.
No AP, but a lot of shots.
-1 AP on a heavy bolter.
Really?
Yes.
That's nice.
So it's going to tear through any orc boy squad, and I can speak from experience. I've torn through a few. Yeah, so any Hormagaunts are going to just be torn through by a heavy bolter team. Let alone the idea of the artillery. The Basilisk shoots a heavy D6, but you roll 2d6 and take the better. The Manticore is a straight 2d6. These things are not expensive. I can build a full battalion with the 14 command points, because the 9 plus the 3, starting with Creed as the commander, 1,500 points, and I can throw 4 Basilisks on the fields with a Manticore and just devastate and re-roll when I want.
If you're in a horde army and you're not throwing your boys in a truck, just so it can buffer those wounds, just so we can make it to get one good melee in, they're playing it wrong, sir. They're playing it wrong.
How many boys can you fit in a truck?
Battle wagon, you can fit 20. A normal truck fits 12 models, but you could do 2 groups of 10. You might not be getting the mob rule or whatever it's called, the green horde, or
Sure.
just getting them in melee.
Right, but ultimately the thing that I've noticed and seen so much in different articles and meta discussions